Hi, my name is Nikki Patton, and this is my research proposal for the Student Personnel Administration in Higher Education thesis. My study will be looking to see if there's a correlation between a student's disadvantaged identities and their chances of success in college. Before I can really dive into this, I should start off by giving you some definitions. First off, I want to talk about what a disadvantaged identity might be. This will be defined as a minority identity, such as being a person of color, or possibly being female, for example. Or it might be an identity that does a disservice to the individual, such as having a disability or going to an institution far away from family. The other important thing to define is collegiate success. Success will be defined in 3 different ways. First off, complete success will be defined as completing a college degree without stopping out or dropping past full time or withdrawing or being removed for any reason, including disciplinary issues, low grades, health well-being, that kind of thing. Partial success will be defined as dropping past full time or withdrawing from college, but eventually completing a degree. Lack of success will be defined as leaving college or not returning to complete their degree. Research, skipped a slide. So there's clearly a problem here. Sanford Sugar shares that higher education began as early as the 12th century, largely to educate young ministers. At this time, education was mostly meant for young white Christian men. So throughout the 19th century, more people, such as women and people of color, began to be allowed to join these young men in their studies at separate institutions at first. And then in the early half of the 20th century, these minorities began to be accepted into the previously exclusive institutions. This is based on Shu, Jones, and Torres's research. Higher education has come a long way since then, with people being able to largely attend the same schools together. However, from the very beginning, these minority groups, so these women or these people of color, they've had harder experiences. Again, Shu, Jones, and Torres stated that student subcultures developed over time, with these insider groups tending to dominate the rewards and prestige of campus. One of the biggest problems that's come from this is that institutions aren't able to retain these disadvantaged students as well as they can retain their more privileged students. This is shown in Boyd, Kamaka, and Braun's research. This means that these individuals are not receiving college diplomas at a proportional rate to their more privileged peers. So what could be causing this? Is it a lack of drive? More likely, it's excessive roadblocks, lack of access to important information, dealing with racism, stigma, etc. So during this study, I will be answering the question, is there a relationship between students having one or more disadvantaged identities and their chances of succeeding in college? Research has already shown that disadvantaged students simply do not persist at the same rate as privileged students. Han, for example, found that 42% of African Americans finished degrees, compared to 62% of their white counterparts. Native Americans and Alaskans persist at even lower rates, per Lopez's research. Beyond racial minorities, only just over a quarter of first-generation college students graduate in 4 years, based on Kundu's research. Goldberg, Kovlanka, and Black found that LGBTQ students are affected too, with almost 25% of these students experiencing harassment that led some of them to leave school. So are these students just not tough? After all students face roadblocks. Grit is a common term that can mean resilience or the ability to push through hard situations. These minority students are not only facing regular struggles, but additional stressors as well. Patterson, Silverwolf, Taylor, McGuinn, and Blackdeer found that minority students experience a lack of social belonging. And Hun says that a sense of belonging is really important to persistence to graduation. Disadvantaged students face different problems than others. Some have never filled out financial aid forms. They might not know where their money is coming from. Maybe they don't have a safe place to go to at the end of the day. They might care for dependents as well. Many of these students also face food insecurity. Camello and Elliott found that minority students who experience food insecurity are impacted by this increased worry of not knowing where their next meal will come from. Stress from these financial problems can actually cause cognitive issues as well. Some of these factors are even out of their control. For example, Torres' study showed that among deaf Latinx students, talk about a buildup of multiple disadvantaged identities there, their father not being present in their life impacted their collegiate success. They have no control over whether their father was present or not. Kundu's study found that success relies on more than just academic ability or mental toughness, since students need to balance so many things at once, especially today. But this is particularly hard with the number of things that disadvantaged students are balancing. This can be seen mirrored in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For example, if students don't have food or finances, or even if they don't have that next level up, esteem, love, a sense of belonging, they aren't able to move up the hierarchy and engage in higher level learning. Peraskin, Hardofer, and Berg. So what happens when a student experiences not one but multiple of these identities? Camello and Elliott found that students with one of these identities were more likely to experience food insecurity, meaning they would have a second disadvantaged identity. No wonder they also found that this could lead to lower GPAs. Frickham, Oster, McCall, and Desjardins found that these statuses can pile up and they can even become cyclical. Achieving higher levels of education is associated with earning more financially. Because of this, students with highly educated parents are more likely to be financially stable throughout college, as Frickham et al. Show. First-generation students, however, not only lack important knowledge about college, but also tend to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. With less money to finance their education, first-generation students also need to take out more loans and work longer hours than their peers. Again, this is found in Firkham's studies. The good news is that other research has shown that social capital can increase students' chances of success. Unfortunately, social capital is also more likely to be in the hands of those who are more privileged. Almeida found that social capital increases first generation's GPAs. However, the resources simply aren't available to disadvantaged students at the same rate as they are to their more privileged peers. Historically, those who have had access to information and resources control where that information and those resources go. So first generation college students, for example, don't have any of these resources because their parents didn't attend college. And as such, their parents don't know the people or the tricks of the trade, like filling out a FAFSA. So who's going to help these first generation college students? Not their parents. Without their parents having that knowledge, they can't pass it down to their students. This leads to the control remaining with the educated middle or upper class students. So what do we do then? We need to make sure that the interventions that we put into place target the population that we are working with. We can't just give people from low socioeconomic backgrounds money. We can't just give food to those who are food insecure. Hunn's study found that success came from thinking about the specific group of students and what their specific needs were. Kundu found that while his study participants were hard workers, if they weren't properly supported, they became disengaged in their education. For Lopez, he found that Native Americans and Alaskans specifically, for example, needed to see a possibility of using their education to support their community. So if we just gave them what it looked like they needed on the outside, be that a mentor or financial aid, we'd be missing this important piece. Helping students feel like they belong is a good place to start and allows them to voice their needs. Patterson-Silverwolf found that those who received a one-time intervention about belonging persisted at a higher proportion to those who didn't. So who am I going to look at for my study? I'm specifically going to be looking at private schools who are part of ACHA. ACHA is the Association of Twin Cities Colleges Housing Administrations. I'll be looking specifically at the private schools who are a part of ACHA. I will be looking for students who have attended these schools within the last 10 years, just in order to keep things relevant. And I'll be looking for two different types of people. Everybody will either have attained a degree from one of these institutions or will not have attained a degree. So this could be a person who'd be a part of that second group would be somebody who maybe attended Concordia University where I work for a while, but then decided to drop out. Or maybe someone who attended University of St. Thomas and was withdrawn because of low grades or inability to pay their bill. For this, I'll be using a qualitative study to find a correlation. Specifically, I'll be using a survey. The number of disadvantaged identities will be the independent variable, and success in college will be the dependent variable. For my survey, I will have 3 portions. The first will gather information such as basic information like their age, what institution they attended, and when they attended that school. The second portion will determine if they achieved collegiate success. So it'll ask whether they graduated from that school, if they stopped out. If they did stop out, it'll ask how long they stopped out for and what the reason was. And then the third portion will determine which disadvantaged identities they have. So are they a female, person of color, of a non-traditional age when they started school? Were they from a low socioeconomic background? Do they identify as LGBTQ+? Are they a first or second generation immigrant? Do they have a disability, either physical or hidden? Are they a first generation college student? Did they not have a parent around when they grew up? Do they consider themselves Christian or atheist, or are they of the minority and don't consider themselves one of those two? Did they move to a different state to attend college? And those are just a few of the disadvantaged identities that we'll check for. Finally, I will then use Pearson's R with a p-value of 0.05 to determine whether my results are relevant or not. So my timeline for this study will be as follows. In March, I will need to determine which IRB boards I need to apply for. Not only will I need to apply for the IRB for Concordia University, Wisconsin, but I will likely also need to apply for IRBs in the Minnesota area, specifically in the Twin Cities. In March, I'll also plan to submit things so I can get approval. In April, I'll start connecting with the school alumni offices at each of the different institutions and start requesting the emails that I need of the graduates or previous students. In May, June, July, and August, I will send out a survey. I'll plan to send out these surveys at the beginning of each month to people who haven't responded yet. At the end of June, in addition, I'll plan to do some preliminary data analysis to determine if I'm receiving the data that I need. For example, am I getting a good representation of students who didn't graduate, or am I only receiving responses from those who did graduate? Am I getting a good representation of students who have these disadvantaged identities? If the data doesn't show to be being what I need, then I will plan to reassess and determine if I need to send out a different type of survey. In September, once I've received all of my information, I will plan to begin analysis and write my thesis. That was my research proposal for my topic being the correlation between students' disadvantaged identities and their chances of success in college for my thesis for the SPAHI program. Thank you.